Good evening, and welcome to this meeting of the Ordinance Committee on May 21st, 2018 at 7 p.m. We'll go through and take attendance. Mr. Van Truren? Here. Mr. Miller? Present. Mr. Janik? Here. The chair is present. Mr. Winarski?
Here.
Mr. Cowger?
Here.
Mr. Nahorn?
Present.
Everybody in the administration is also present. Moving on, we have one item on the agenda, A-18-28. Add a section to the Amherst codified ordinances pertaining to vendor carts and trucks. This was actually, officially it was submitted by me. It was something though that had a lot of help in from the mayor. I'd actually like him to speak to it if possible, please, because this is really what you had worked on.
Okay. You might remember, some of you are newer to council and you actually weren't here when last time this brought up, but I think in July of last year, this almost exact legislation was brought before you, and you've done a couple moratoriums since. So I thought it was time, with summer coming, that council should start thinking about some regulations for our mobile vendors. I really would like this to be more broad than just food vendors. I think mobile vendors, people that are selling things, it should also pertain to. I don't think we should be picking out one type of business. With the basketball playoffs and all, you know, you see these vendors showing up selling fake knockoffs and stuff on every street corner if you let them. But it's quite extensive. I think there's a lot in here. It's the work from a whole bunch of different cities, large cities, small cities, and even some townships that or villages that this came from. So kind of took the best of all of them that I saw. I know it's long, and I probably don't expect you to get anything completed in one sitting, but I really hope you take this serious, start making some suggestions, and get something done with this sometime early this summer. So if you have particular questions to items on it, I can talk about it and just see where it goes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And actually, before I call on council, would also like to thank the mayor. I had worked on something similar to this. It was not nearly as thorough or in-depth. So thank you for helping out and being able to submit this, and it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Mr. Van Truren.
Yeah, thank you everybody who worked on this, Mr. Mayor, pertains you and everybody else who played a role in this. So a quick question, one thing that stands out to me, probably because it was in bold here, but design review. So can you explain to me, I'm assuming they'll be pretty lenient if it's a mobile vendor, but how can a mobile vendor who has a mobile unit that might be used in multiple cities be expected to make sure that their vehicle is compatible with nearby structures in terms of color and et cetera?
I think I've seen this again in other municipalities, and just because they do it don't necessarily mean we have to do it. I knew this would bring up concerns, but all the buildings in this downtown review district have, if they want to change the color of a door or a shutter or put in windows or the roof, it all has to go in front of the design review board. So how is it fair to somebody else that puts all this money into a brick and mortar, then a mobile vendor comes by and sets up a carnival style tent with banners and streamers and, you know, big pink elephants all over it, and it just doesn't fit into the downtown area.
I'm not against it.
So I mean, that's just the thought behind it. And there's only a couple criteria that the you know, it talks about things that the design and review board should be looking at. I mean, physical condition and state of repair. You don't want something really dilapidated coming into our really nice downtown. So there's just small things. It could be tweaked, but I just think our downtown is really nice, and you don't want it cluttered up into a carnival type atmosphere all the time.
The example you just gave is a good one.
Thank you.
Mr. Winarski.
Thank you. Mr. Ventura, I'd like the opportunity to expand upon what the mayor said, being on the design review. Design review came around as a condition of getting grants. It serves a great purpose, and it's expanded beyond that. But one of the things, design review is required to exist in order for downtown Main Street to get grants. If you start saying who's reviewed and who isn't, you're probably opening up a can of worms that wouldn't fare well for the. We need to have design review, look at anybody doing business downtown who has exterior work or any kind of review. So we don't touch anything inside the building, but anything that's seen outside, design review is expected to review it, and it is a condition of getting grants from the Fed and the county.
Makes sense to me.
Thanks for the question.
Mr. Miller.
I just had a
Clarification, who's on the design review right now currently?
Chuck?
If I could. Let's see here, bear with me here, David Fox, I'm sorry, Mr. Fox, myself. It's,
You're the architect?
yeah,
Maisie?
Maisie and Yorks. And, shame on me, the realtor is, Swanser.
Mr. Swanser.
Yeah,
So there's certain criteria, I think you need so many of each people.
absolutely. You
And
have
I
to
think
have an
those are
architect, you have to have
actually
2 local
approved by
businesses.
city council, the members.
So there's 5?
No, there's 7. We have 2 architects,
Fox,
a
North,
realtor,
Yorks,
2 local
Swan.
business people,
Who are those?
Main Street? Main Street head?
the
Head of Main
DRB.
Street? Head of Main Street?
No, Teresa is not. Oh, my stars,
The
who is the
chair?
local businesses?
Chairman of Main Street?
No, she's not a member.
I could bring those members for the next meeting, and you yourself have approved them. They've been in front of council, Mr. Miller.
Yeah. We haven't had many meetings recently, so I'm sorry, and it's changed
Right.
since then, so I have to apologize. There was a time I could have rattled it off like that. I can send you the information. All right, I'll send it to the clerk of council and have her distribute it, if that's okay.
No.
Is there anybody else on council or the administration that would like to speak? If not, is there anybody from the audience that would like to speak?
Sure.
Can you go up to the podium and?
Daryl McCarty, from, we have Old Company Center. If the trucks were allowed in, I think they should be reviewed because, like, say they're at Lorraine County Fair, and that some of those have like all those lights, that'd be way too bright if they were, so maybe they weren't allowed to like light all the lights if they came, you know, for example. So I think there should be some kind of ruling, or some kind of, somebody should inspect them, because I wouldn't want them across from me all, you know, lit up, or, and especially if there was multiple ones, would, you know, it could look like one like a circus, and I don't think that's what we, you know, intend this to be. Even though I don't agree, if it does happen, I'd like there to be rules. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, would you like to respond?
And just remember, that's only in the downtown review area. It's just a few block area that is part of our downtown historic district that would pertain to.
Mr. Winarski?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to kind of go over where my head's at and why I'd vote and why I'll be asking the questions that I do and why I may push in some direction or another. Historic downtown, I think food trucks are a great thing. I don't necessarily buy into the notion that they're a good thing downtown. If you have a birthday party at your house and you want to have a food truck, I think that's a great thing. And we should make it as easy as possible for them to provide you with something you want to make your event better. Downtown's a different duck though. We have the DRB, and we've enforced a lot of design requirements on local businesses. You also look at the local businesses who've invested a lot of money. They're required to provide bathrooms, hot water, garbage, refuse disposal. None of that exists here. Local businesses pay taxes. Once again, if you have a mobile food vendor coming in, my understanding is they don't pay any tax, sales tax, excuse me. And what I do appreciate is there's a permit fee, because right now they can just roll in. They're entitled to fire and police protection, but they're not paying for any of that. It's not protectionism, it's a leveling of the playing field. If you set up a mobile food truck, I look downtown, we really don't have that many places to eat outside. We don't have the picnic benches, so they're gonna have to go somewhere. We don't have the garbage cans outside that I think a large number of, there'd be a lot of waste created. I don't think we're in a position right now with the garbage cans. They're gonna get thrown somewhere. I see people, they'll be taking their food into different businesses, and I'm just not a fan of that. I want to see a level playing field, so anything we can do to address that. And I think it's touched upon in section 7, where you identify some different areas that they could be located. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but my biggest concern is a level playing field. To roll in and poach customers from businesses that have worked really hard to come in compliance with DRB, with the different, the food, health departments and all the different departments that we have here, I don't think that's fair. So I'm just looking for a level playing field. Let's see here. So I would ask the Safety Service Director of the Mayor, could you expand upon your ideas for Section 7, or is that something we discuss as a group? What's your vision there?
I think, certainly we need some more direction from you all, and more of this has got to come together, but I guess if you challenge me to think about an area I might think about approving, maybe, and please don't, I'll drop one place, maybe south of the tracks. Maybe that would be a place we might consider if that area meets all the criteria. Potentially, that could be a place we could think about. But again, I'm not going to take the brush and paint myself into the corner either.
Thank you, I appreciate it, Mr. Jeffries. One of the things that I was going to say is that I don't want these trucks on public parking. I have an ability to compromise. South of the tracks would be acceptable. That's recently developed. It's not in front of existing buildings and stuff like that where people are very accustomed to parking. It would generate almost a modest expanse of our downtown area. I think that could be a positive thing. I like the idea off the top of my head. So thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Renarski. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Boy, a bunch of things here. First off, thank you, Mayor, for putting this together. Obviously, we had an issue. The issue did not turn out well in the attempt to bring a food truck down here. Whenever we have an issue like that, it's good that we try to find resolutions so we don't have to deal with that in the future. One of the things that, well, there's a bunch of things that I agree with Councilman Borowski on, but there's also some things that I have questions in, maybe would like to see added or changed. This downtown historic district is absolutely a good place. The way it is, we're over 5% occupancy, and the one that just switched over is already in plans to put another food place in there. And they're willing to make an investment into the downtown and into the facility that they now own. And I think that investment allows them to provide that fair playing field and competition. A food truck doesn't. We definitely have to look at the idea that our downtown business area is a downtown investment business area. These businesses are investing for the long haul, and I think that is something that we want to promote, and I think that is a selling point for Amherst. And if we step away from that mindset, we may deter other people from coming in and investing downtown, or even in the other businesses that are not in the historic downtown district. I also agree with, and really actually put some more thought to it when you brought this up, that you're going to have an impact on these local businesses other than just customers. You're going to have an impact on safety services. You're going to have an impact on the businesses themselves using the restroom, disposing garbage. I think that's putting an unfair burden on them while they walk out with the dollars and leave the mess behind. So I can see that as a problem as well. I really don't want them on public property at all unless it's an event. Unless we have an event that is set aside. For example, we used to have a jamboree and things like that. If we have some form of community days of some means, that would be something to bring food trucks down here. But I also like to see them on private property only. And what I mean by that is private business property. If you want to open up a business on your private property, you have to go through the zoning board of appeals, because you're now going to be selling merchandise or service, and you have to make sure that is not impacting your neighbors. Putting a food truck on somebody's property to sell their goods to somebody else, to me, is not residential property. It's not zoned that way. So I would have a problem with that. Now, if you want to have a party for your new graduate, which we're going to be seeing here in the next month or so, and you want to bring a food truck down, bring a food truck down, you pay them, they provide the food, and
on the way they go. But I don't like the idea of the food truck actually being the one selling to individual customers. If they want to come down and provide a service like that for a party or an event, the VFW or any of these other entities decide they want to have a food truck come in on their private property. If their zone business, or they want to go ahead and cover the costs, that's a different story. But this idea of allowing them to come in and set up on private property outside of the business district, I don't even like that at all. I don't think that's the way our city should be, where these things are just popping up on private properties and because they have enough room to not encroach upon the area. I think there was, I apologize, I'm going back to permitted location is so many feet away from certain boundaries. So just to start with that point, the next thing is on public streets and posted sidewalks. I'd like to go back over this again because it seemed a little confusing as to what could or could be near a sidewalk, by a sidewalk, on a sidewalk, and I'd have to lay it next to each other. My first read of this has the idea of what is a sidewalk, what is a street, where the mobile vending devices can be. It almost seems like because we're adding more than just a food truck, that's changed the way we've approached sidewalks and how close we are to them. So that to me is kind of throwing me off. Maybe I just read this too quick or not clear enough. I didn't get clarity from it. But I don't like the idea of being on any public municipal lot unless we're having an event that the city is defined. Safety Service Director says we're having a jamboree and we're going to allow trucks to come down here and they're going to park on municipal or on the street and we're going to close it off. Then that's a different story. We've set up the situation where we can handle restrooms and food disposal and litter and our safety services will be there on site like they have been for any of our other events. But down here in downtown Amherst, I'm just not a fan at all right now of seeing food trucks come in. If you have a business right now and you're not able to sell and you want to start selling, then we had a business owner who bought the store right next to him and gutted it and added more kitchen space and added more seating, made the investment because he wanted to provide more food. If you want to come down here and provide food for the residents in this business district, then buy a building. Invest in our community. Put the money in. Because when you do that, you're not that migrant renter who just comes in for a short time and leaves. So with that, if I have anything else, I just, that zoning, the vending zoning areas, I don't even like private if they're going to be there to sell and to do business. If they're there for a party and it's a private event, because they're just like liquor license, just like the different types of permits that you can get. Maybe we look into different types of permits. Instead of just one permit, maybe there's a permit for holding events on private property. But I really don't like the idea of having businesses on private property in residential areas. So just a thought, maybe we can or cannot do that.
I'd like to comment on that if I could.
Sure.
I think when the terms private property are used, the regulation is not intended to imply that you can put these things anywhere on private property. I think that the proposed ordinance could be clarified to say that the use would have to comply with the zoning code. In other words, you couldn't put one of these vending devices in a residential district, period. I think what the mayor is getting at with the regulation is that there are areas in commercial districts that are owned by the business. Giant Eagle parking lot was an example that he gave, that may want to have these, devices or in their parking lots. So I think you could tweak this to say that, first of all, by doing it on private property, you have to comply with the zoning code. But secondly, private property may be intended to be privately owned property that the public uses either for parking or driving other than a road or a highway. And there's a kind of a precedent for that kind of regulation in the leaving the scene of an accident section. There's a section that applies to public thoroughfares, and there's a section that applies to private property, but which is used by the public for transportation, motion, or parking. And you could probably change the definition of private property to be similar to that kind of use. So I think there you avoid the problem Joe's indicated about this kind of use on private. The other thing I would observe is that if somebody invites one of these trucks to their child's graduation party and they're not selling from the device, it's not a street vending device or vending device, because they're not selling. So you're not prohibited from having that kind of a thing.
Correct.
Do we have to clarify that? I'm sorry.
Well-
I guess what, this is a lot to digest. Maybe I'm overstepping myself. It's a major regulation. I would like to do a red line version. Maybe the mayor doesn't want me to say that, but I think what he's done is a really good job of trying to pull together regulations from various municipalities and get to a meaningful overarching regulation. I think though that because you're pulling things from here and there, sometimes it needs to be a little tweaked. For example, on the first page, on A8, it talks about a mobile vending device, what the definition is, means a container or vehicle for the sale, display, or transportation of goods, wares, merchandise. And then it has this unfortunate phrase, or equipment used for many of tasks by the vendor. I think that what that is intending to say is that we're not talking about the mops and the brooms and the stuff that the vendor has in his truck. But it doesn't include, for example, food items, although in 2, there's a direct reference to food. And in under section there's a definition of food item also. So I think there should be a consistent reference to food items as opposed to food and just things like that. I think I guess I would like to tackle the kind of just tidy up. I suppose that would entail another meeting at which we would consider, a slightly tweaked version of the ordinance. I don't know how Mr. Pecora feels about that, or the mayor.
I'm happy. I'm real happy with that.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That was kind of where I was headed. Thank you.
Can the chair would like to speak, and then Mr. McCartney, and then Mr. Cowger, and then the mayor? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Sorry. Just a slight call out. We were talking about like graduation parties and whether they're not selling to individual people. That actually is spelled out in section 3B. Application for mobile vending on private property. Basically, if you're not charging a per diner or customer, then it would be exempt. And it actually gives graduation parties as that example.
What chapter? Give me a page number.
3, bottom of page 3. Under B, unless my page numbers don't jive with yours. Oh, my page numbers don't jive with yours.
What chapter?
Mr. Dembitsky.
3,
There's 2 different versions here. There's the original and then there's the updated. I believe you're looking at the original versus the updated.
this is the one that was,
I don't think that's, at least I can.
You know, I think that the things might have gotten reversed. The updated one might be the one that you have, and the one that was first, I think they actually got
Okay,
reversed.
because the one that was, that the mayor and I had talked about does
It
have
says
a
draft,
provision
not
in
official
there.
draft. It's got a portion in there about that.
So,
So I think some time with me and Frank to clarify these, which version we're gonna be using is a good,
Okay, so
because I think me and him had the same one as the current one, but somehow
I think they have a different one than the one that we have.
I think they're just reversed in our book.
Mr. Hardy, would you still like to speak?
Sure, I would.
Okay.
So when I first got up here, I thought we were going over sections, I didn't, so I thought we were just talking about the appearance of vehicles, or the food trucks. But, I agree with Chuck as far as, being able to be in our area, downtown for multiple reasons. Some of it, apparently I'm the only businessman that showed up today, but, I don't think it's a level playing field at all, because we're open 7 days a week. When it's snow, we're cleaning our parking lots at whatever cost, and we do, you know, sometimes half the business. When it's storming out at 5 o'clock, we don't have a good dinner. But when it's beautiful out, of course, you know, everybody does well. The food trucks are only gonna come in on the days that are gonna fit them. And we've invested a lot of money and a lot of time, and day after day we do. I mean, I'm there every day, pretty much. And I don't feel like that's level, it's a level field. Because they're just coming, and I do this for a living, and so, because I do this for a living, this is my living. It's not a part-time job, it's not something that I do as, you know, a hobby, which I think a lot of these are. This is what we do. And on top of that, you know, we give back to the community. They just come in, they set up, they do what they're gonna do, whatever products they're selling, and then they get to take the profits and leave. You know, I'm sure some of them are, you know, probably getting gas here and that kind of thing. I understand that, but for the most part, they don't. This is where I live, I work. And I don't think it's a fair playing field. And, you know, we have to pay utilities. I just don't think it's fair. They can put the price if they want because it doesn't cost them as much. Where us, we have a lot more expenditures. So, I agree, if you're going to do this, there should definitely be some rules, like I said earlier, but I really don't think it should be in our area, downtown Amherst. I think, you know, myself, other places, we have put a lot of money and a lot of time. And I mean, it's not running the restaurant that I do. It's not a job, it's a lifestyle. It's what I chose. It's a 7 days a week. When somebody doesn't show up, we're there. And all, you know, the restaurants, the bars, you know, they're all doing the same thing. I'm not excluded as being the only one doing that. But, and we have to put on every single day the best product we can. They can come in, do it for 1 day and leave. I just don't think it's right. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cobb?
Yes, a couple of different items, and I apologize, I didn't go through the current legislation that we're looking at, is it the one that has mobile vending regulations draft at the top?
They're both very similar, so I really think if you go.
But
through
on
it,
the
we can
top
pick out
of
parts
every
both of
one,
them.
I mean, they're two different things, so I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right
We'll talk
one.
about both might have good ideas in them, and me and Mr.
Okay, all
Carlson can put it together.
right. There's a typo in both of them, and with the one where it's got the mobile vending regulations draft, it would be in the definitions section, section N, where it talks about, provide that display foods are not displayed for more than 7 days, but yet it has 5 in parentheses, and then consecutive days of no more than 52, and it's got 25 in parentheses after that. That needs
Okay.
changed. So that's just a typo that needs to be taken care of. The other issues that I'm questioning or asking about is, and it goes back for me, one of my favorite things whenever I was a child growing up in the city, I love to hear the music of the ice cream truck go down through. And I think Mr. Miller was in my neighborhood, so he heard that sound too. How are they affected? I still hear the ice cream truck in Westchester in the summer times, not as often as used to, but you know, they're selling from the street, 2 kids coming right up to the side of the street. We need to know how they are going to be addressed. Talking about mobile vending in the definitions section, again, it would be in the definitions section N on the one draft legislation. Talks about nonprofits. My question would be for the Girl Scouts. They have their big fundraisers where they sell their cookies, and they set up throughout different areas of the city where they vend and sell the cookies from a mobile table that they set up. I didn't see anywhere else in the legislation where it talks about the nonprofits other than in the definitions section. You know, that's their big money raiser throughout the year, and you know, we need to know how, or they need to know how do they go about selling this. Do they have to pull a permit? Can the Girl Scout Association pull one permit that would cover all the different troops or whatever? I apologize, I wasn't a Girl Scout, so I don't know the right terminology for the individual groups. But that, and then also for businesses, restaurant owners that are currently in the city, not necessarily downtown, but some of the ones I know would, during renovations, they would want to bring in a mobile food truck that they have set up for their business. And whenever the business is shut down, they tend to have that in their parking lot, still maintain traffic, and vend from the mobile unit while the main building is under renovations. How do we address that in here? So, you know, those 3 items are the questions that I would have, and then just the clarification in the definitions. Is it 5, is it 7, or is it 52 or 25? Wording versus numerals. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Cover. Mr. Mayor and then Mr. Miller.
Okay, I think some of those things could be cleared up pretty easy. I've seen some sample legislation in other cities. Just want to go over, you know, pretty much a lot of the things I heard about, so when me and Mr. Carlson get together. I heard some on a comment about no public property. I don't know if I'm quite there, but maybe we can tweak the language a little bit to satisfy, because I do agree that would be my preference, but whether it's the best thing we should do or not, we'll kind of get some advice from our law director. Good idea, I like that though. The private property, only doing business on private property only, could somewhat be defined under private property in commercial or industrial zones. So I think we can tweak that fairly simply. And the parties, I have seen some copies of that from other cities, so I think when somebody has a private property, you waive the permit fee. They can't be selling things, it's solely, you know, you pay one fee, they show up at your house. So I think that's fairly simple. I have seen some frozen treat legislation in other cities. It talks about ice cream trucks can only stop when hailed. They can only stay in certain areas for a certain amount of time. So I have seen something, and I think we could add that, fairly simple. Nonprofits, pretty simple, I think, to add that. Maybe still in no, they might have to abide by some of the rules, not, you know, in public parking spaces, blah, 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 but if they're set up across the street on public, or on private property, you know, I think they, you know, you put some language in there about waiving the permits, but they still have to follow some of the rules about where and when they can set up. And I'm stuck on a temporary while renovating, but we'll put some thought into it and see what we can come up with. That might be something they have to go to the zoning board of appeals for and get a short period of time, maybe that they could do something like that. But I haven't really thought, that's one I didn't think of, so we'll put some energy into that. And you'll have to, so that's the things I've seen so far. If more come up, I'll keep writing them down, and then me and Mr. Carlson will get together very soon so that before the next committee meeting, you guys will have some, a sample of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Miller and then Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd like to, Mr. Mayor, I think that that's a step in the right direction. Yes, I remember those vehicles coming through our area, however, and I think that's a different thing. But I have no problem with having them, all trucks, register with the city. And just like anything else, we right now have, I believe the police department has all solicitors being registered and they're fingerprinted. I don't see why we don't register any vehicle that comes in here and wants to sell to our solicit business from our residents, especially in a residential area where they're taking a chance. They're hoping that if somebody's allowed to come in the city in a moving vehicle and sell out of it, that the city is given approval in the first place. I think that would be kind of an understanding. So I would hope that we have them register with the city and that the person driving the vehicle or doing the business is run through the police department, fingerprinted and things like that. I think that's a field sense of security. So I agree with Mr. Cowger on following up on that, allowing that opportunity, because like you had stated, it's not stopping, it's not set to do business, it's just coming through and give the kids an experience, and that is a positive experience. I apologize, I didn't get a hold of you personally, but I did speak to pretty much the four corners, as I like to call them, the four cornerstones of this downtown area that has to do with food. You know, there's burgers and pizza and all the other fun stuff that comes in. And they didn't pull any punches. I listened to, I was actually absent the day that we had that food truck meeting, and I listened to it, the video twice, because it was quite lengthy. And I do remember you coming up, and I did have that in the back of my mind. So I wanted to make sure I got a hold of the others. I know Chris was here, Larry, Paul, but I touched base with all three of those. I'm sorry I didn't get a hold of you. And they asked me, like, do I need to be there? You can always be here. But I think that you'll be able to see what comes out of this meeting. And if your time is short and valuable, which most business owners are, because like you said, where are you at normally now? Probably at your business. So I didn't want them to get thrown in a truck to think that they don't care. They have made contact with me as well. Good. So the permits, once again, I'd like to see the permits. Maybe, Frank, we can add something like that, or the mayor, you can look at something like that for any mobile vehicle. Anybody that wants to sell wares.
In here? Like $235, I think.
There is a permit fee, and I would just like it to be registered. So not only is there a permit fee if you want to do business there, I'd like them to be registered. We have a lot of people that are coming in selling goods, like you had stated. When we had the cabs last year, I believe, or it was last year, they were selling goods and then off they go, and they could be, you know, garbage wares and what have you, or controversial issues, or merchandise at that. So if we could consider that as well. I would appreciate that. Thank you for your floor.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Janik?
How long does our moratorium last?
I think it's over, to be honest with you.
I think it's over because the state fire code became effective.
But we did a second one, I think we had a date on it, but I thought it had ended. If not, it's soon.
I actually thought it was through the end of July. However, from a previous conversation, it might have been the end of June.
So
But I think it's still in effect.
by the time you move this through, it's going to be.
Well, my point is that there were pieces from there that I liked, but I haven't seen them in here relating to the generator, the use of generators.
That was something else I thought of, I was probably gonna bring to you. There's, being safety service director has talked a little bit, if we provide these spots, them spots might also have an electric meter and electric, so there wouldn't have to be in a generator for a charge. So that's something that could help improve this, but that would be part of the safety service director's plan to offer that and then charge them for the use of that electric.
That would be interesting, yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll incorporate those things from that moratorium into this.
Thank you, Mr. Janik. And I will point out too, the one legislation does have that you can't be within 100 feet of another food serving business. So that may not necessarily have the sound ordinance from the truck piece of it, but 100 feet is still a decent-ish distance from a food serving business. And from the last meeting, there is that map on the back that shows a 100-foot radius from each corner of a business that has a food permit, I believe. So it shows that it blocks actually a large amount of that area in downtown itself. Mr. Van Truren.
Sure, I'm just curious if, and this is really directed at no one in particular, but if anyone has any idea of the number of food truck vendors in the area who might be interested in coming and selling in Amherst if we do pass legislation that lets them do so. And the reason I ask is because it might answer a lot of the questions we have now about providing an area for them to go to and you know, what kind of space there needs to be, whether anyone would even come at all to sell food in the streets here if we were to pass this town legislation that allowed them. I'm assuming there's a limited number of food trucks in Northeast Ohio that might be in the right area to come here. Maybe it would be worth our while to have someone reach out to all of them and ask if they would come to Amherst if this kind of legislation would pass. It's just a thought.
Thank you, Mr. Van Truren. Is there any other comments from Mr. McCartney? Would you like to?
Sure.
Can you go to the podium,
Sure.
please?
As you were all talking about the private and property and that kind of thing, well, it would kind of fall that two things that come to mind to me. One would be schools. The school is private property, so they could set up in by the football field. And it could be, you know, it'd be different if there was a number of them and so many times, but you wouldn't want 12 of them coming down there and setting up for the whole, you know, for the whole season. That wouldn't be good for any of us, business owners or restaurant people. But I could see them being allowed to do that a few times. I don't have an objection to that. Same thing with Nordson. They came over and they did, you know, they brought some trucks in for special events, but we wouldn't want them to come in every weekend or every Thursday or every Tuesday. My boys went to vocational school and one of them took culinary arts there, and they brought food trucks in there. So I went down there and, you know, and partake of the food trucks. They actually have some that kind of travel all over, travel the circuit. And that's probably what they would want to do, is come to an area if they were allowed. They find out which ones are, where they're allowed to go. They set up their little areas. Sometimes there's 4, sometimes there's more. So I think there should be some limits or some thought about the limits of how many trucks, how many times they could come in, because you know I wouldn't want them there every home football game. That would hurt us. Just some thought for and some consideration for the business owners, especially the restaurant owners. The same thing with, you know, if they're selling some of their wares, there's places in town that, you know, have gift shops too. So you know, it is exciting, you know, there is a place for them. I just don't think they should be right downtown. And if they are gonna be in some locations, there should be some rules. So, and private property is, you gotta be careful with that, because, you know, the school is private property, so they could fall right into that. They will, you know, anybody's gonna find their niche. They're gonna find their avenues that's open, and once it's written, they're in. So I think all that should be in consideration too. I mean, some needs to be written, so I understand. This is, you know, on the same token, I appreciate you writing something up, getting something followed up. You know, it's important. I'm not objecting that. I'm just telling you some of my feelings too. And as a businessman, pizza owner, and I'm trying to speak for others too. All right, thanks.
Thank you. One clarification, for purposes of this, are schools considered private or public property?
That would be considered private property, I believe. And they would have to get the permission from the school. People's just not gonna be able to go there and set up shop. The school would have to give them permission to do that, and I kinda doubt they want them to compete with their own concession stands. But you don't know, I mean, they would still have to have permission, but
I'll
there's,
just do that example.
right, no, I understand.
Yeah.
And that's some good thought
just-
that we'll
yeah.
put into consideration.
I
I
guess
think,
normally I think of
according for
them-
this, it would be considered a private property.
I guess I normally consider them public, which is why I was just clarification on my point, so,
In the
thank you.
sense that the city of Amherst doesn't have control over them, they're not.
We might have to define that, what public and private
Well,
property
yeah,
is.
that's
It might be something worth putting in here.
That's a good point, too. Mr. Nahorn?
Thank you. First, I want to thank Mr. McCartney for coming down. If we don't hear from our business owners, our residents, people who have, as you said, invested in the town, we won't get the best legislation passed. So having that piece, including us speaking, you speaking, everybody contributing, that provides the best opportunity to have the most successful piece of legislation. So thank you for coming down. Thank you for speaking to your livelihood, as you said. And it is a very, very serious situation. And so we want to, as the mayor has said, go through this the best way that we can. So really appreciate that. I just want to speak briefly to the legislation. I guess it's in our packet, the second half, stating, and the no vendor shall. I think there are some good pieces in there, especially about waste disposal. And that is on page 7, so that hopefully we can ensure that is kept in the final iteration of the ordinance that we consider. Mentions about the no vendor shall conduct business without making available a container suitable for placement of litter. I don't know if we want to go further and say, that they remove also, not just that they provide it, but that they are responsible for removing, something like that. But everything else that's been brought up, I think, is very important. And it's been an important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nahorn. I think we've had some good discussion here. If there is nothing else, Mr. Arnarski?
I apologize, and thank you again, Mr. Chair. Just addressing the insurance issue. We had talked at one time about increasing it to $1 million. The copy I have only requires $50,000 to $100,000 of insurance. I'm looking at $1 million, maybe $2 million. Please.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cowger?
I'd like to make a motion to table this item.
Perfect. Thank you. 1 second. Do I have a second? Mr. Miller? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It is tabled from a roll of vote of 6 to 0.
7.
7 to 0.
Oh, I didn't vote. The chair also votes to table. Sorry, 7 to 0. Mr. Miller? Mr. Cowger?
Second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Chair also votes aye. And we are adjourned at 7:48. Thank you.
I probably should have said this before the meeting was adjourned, but